Imagine this with me. You're standing on a knife-edge ridge in northern Ethiopia, wind howling past your ears, clouds swirling below like a restless sea. Far beneath you, the highlands of Tigray fall away in impossible cliffs, and perched on one of those cliffs, clinging like an ancient thought, is a tiny monastery called Gunda Gunda. For 1700 years, monks have climbed these rocks with bare feet and leather ropes, carrying water, carrying prayer, and carrying secrets. And in late 2023, one of those secrets finally opened its eyes. What they found inside a forgotten leather satchel is not just a manuscript. It is a voice that was never supposed to reach us. A voice that says, the kingdom of God is not coming one day from the sky, but is already burning quietly inside your chest right now. And the disciple who understood this best was not Peter, not John, but Mary Magdalene. Tonight, you and I are going to walk together into that monastery, touch the parchment, listen to words written while Rome was still deciding what Christianity would become, and ask the question almost no one has dared to ask in 2,000 years. What if everything we were taught about Jesus was only half the story? What if the other half was carried across deserts and hidden in mountains exactly so that someone, someday, maybe you would hear it again? Let me take you back to the beginning, before the satchel was opened, before the scholars arrived, before the world even knew this manuscript existed. Picture the year 325 AD. The Roman Emperor Constantine has just summoned 300 bishops to a palace on the shores of Lake Nicaea. The empire is tired of fighting over who Jesus really was. They want one creed, one book, one church. Outside the palace windows, the old Mediterranean world is crumbling. Inside, men in heavy robes argue about words like homoousios and homoousios, one little letter that will decide whether millions live or die as heretics. While they argue, far to the south, beyond the cataracts of the Nile, beyond the reach of Roman legions, a kingdom called Aksum is quietly becoming the second nation in the world to make Christianity its official faith, 20 years before Rome itself. And in that kingdom no one is attending the Council of Nicaea. No one is burning books. No one is drawing lines between orthodox and heretic. They are simply copying everything they can get their hands on, every gospel, every letter, every whisper of the teacher from Galilee. That is the first miracle you need to understand. While Europe was choosing which voices to silence, Ethiopia was saving them all. And the manuscript we are about to open is the purest proof of that rescue. Now come closer. The year is 2023, and a thin, determined man named Dr. Alamayehu Bizune is climbing the same path the monks have climbed for centuries. He is 47 years old, born in Addis Ababa, raised on stories of hidden libraries. For 3 years he has been traveling from monastery to monastery with a portable scanner powered by a solar panel strapped to a mule. He has photographed texts so fragile that a single breath can erase a century. He has slept in caves where bats hang like living curtains. And everywhere he goes, the abbots speak of one satchel, always one satchel, that no outsider has been allowed to open. It sits behind the altar at Gunda Gunda, wrapped in linen the color of dried blood, tied with cords that have not been loosened since the days when Europe was sliding into the Dark Ages. Dr. Alamayehu reaches the monastery at dawn. The air is so thin it tastes metallic. The abbot, a man with eyes like polished obsidian, places the satchel on a low wooden table lit by a single beeswax candle. The leather crackles when the knots are cut. Inside, wrapped in cloth that falls apart at the touch, is a small codex, 94 pages of parchment so thin it feels like the skin of a ghost. The first line, written in square, deliberate gaze letters, reads, "The hidden sayings of the Master to his chosen ones concerning the kingdom that is within." Dr. Alamayehu's hands begin to shake. He knows immediately this is not a commentary, not a hymn, not a later invention. This is something that claims to record the private final conversation of Jesus with his inner circle on the night before they came to arrest him. He sets up his camera under ultraviolet light, infrared, every spectrum he has. The parchment glows. The ink is lamp black mixed with ancient gum. The radiocarbon labs in Oxford and Tucson will later date the skin between 350 and 450 AD within living memory of the apostles themselves. But science is the last thing on his mind in that moment. He is hearing a voice that has been silent for 17 centuries, and it is speaking directly to him. Let me read you the first words he read slowly, the way they deserve to be heard. Do not look for me in temples built by hands, nor in the sky when it thunders with signs. The kingdom does not come with observation. You will not be able to say, look, here it is, or there it is. For behold, the kingdom of God is within you. You recognize part of that sentence from the Gospel of Luke, but here it is not a passing remark. It is the entire message. It is repeated, unfolded, circled back to again and again for 94 pages. The kingdom is not coming. It never left. It is in you, right now, waiting only for you to remember. And then, something that made the hairs on Dr. Alamayehu's neck stand up. Among the disciples asking questions is a woman, Mary, called Magdalene. She does not stand at the back. She does not wait to be spoken to. She asks the first and the hardest question. Master, the prophets promised a kingdom of thrones and armies. You speak of a kingdom inside the heart. How can these be the same? And Jesus answers her, not Peter, not John, her. The prophets saw truly, but through a veil. They mistook the reflection for the light itself. You, Mary, have removed the veil, therefore you understand. I want you to feel the weight of that sentence. In every canonical gospel, Mary Magdalene is a witness. Here, she is the one who sees clearest. Here, Jesus calls her the disciple who understands. And for the next hour, you and I are going to walk through every passage of this forgotten gospel, line by line, and watch how it quietly dismantles everything the empires built in his name. But first, we have to understand why this text survived in Ethiopia and nowhere else. Let me paint the map for you. In the 4th century, the Christian world stretched from Spain to Syria. But there was one place the Roman eagle never flew, the highlands of Axum. Its capital rose on a plateau 2.5 kilometers above the sea, ringed by deserts no army wanted to cross. Its ports on the Red Sea traded with India, Arabia, Rome itself, bringing gold, ivory, and ideas. When the young King Izana decided to make Christianity the state religion around 330 AD, he did not send to Constantinople for instructions. He sent to the desert fathers of Egypt, to the monks who still spoke the language of the apostles, and they sent him everything, every scroll, every fragment, every dangerous idea Rome would soon forbid. While Constantinople was arguing about the nature of Christ, Axum was building churches carved downwards into solid rock, 11 of them at Lalibela, each one a silent declaration that heaven is entered from within. While Europe was sliding into feudal darkness, Ethiopian monks were illuminating manuscripts with colors so vivid they still burn after 1,000 years. And when the Islamic conquests cut the Mediterranean in half, Ethiopia simply turned inward, becoming a Christian island in an ocean of change. The mountains became more than geography. They became a vault. That is why, when the rest of the Christian world decided certain gospels were too mystical, too egalitarian, too dangerous, Ethiopia simply kept copying them. The Gospel of Thomas, the Acts of Andrew, the Apocalypse of Peter, all declared heretical in the West, lived quietly in Ge'ez alongside Matthew and John. And somewhere in that living library, a small community decided that the most dangerous teaching of all, the private final words of Jesus about the kingdom inside every human soul, deserved its own book. Now walk with me into the scriptorium of Gunda Gunda, the year perhaps 420 AD. A monk sits cross-legged on a cowhide, a reed pen between his fingers, an oil lamp flickering beside him. He is copying from a Greek papyrus so old it crumbles as he works. He does not know that in a few decades the Emperor Theodosius will declare every non-canonical text illegal. He does not know that in a few centuries the Library of Alexandria will burn again and again until nothing is left. He only knows that these words feel like fire in his chest, and fire must be passed hand to hand before the night grows cold. So he copies, slowly, reverently, and when he reaches the passages about Mary Magdalene, he dips his pen in red ink, the color reserved for the holiest names, and underlines her words 3 times. 17 centuries later, Dr. Alamayehu sees those red marks glowing under ultraviolet light and feels the monk reaching across time to say, "Pay attention, this matters." Let me read you one of those red passages now. Mary asks, "If the kingdom is within us, why do we suffer?" And Jesus answers, "Because you have forgotten who you are." Suffering is the sound of the soul knocking on the walls of its own forgetting. Do not flee the knocking, open the door. The monk who copied that line pressed so hard the parchment still bears the dent of his pen. You can feel it with your fingertip, a small scar left by ore. I want to pause here and let you feel what this discovery does to a scholar who has spent his life studying the New Testament. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, Princeton professor, the man who taught Ge'ez to the world, received the first photographs in his office in New Jersey. He read 3 lines and closed the file, then he opened it again and wept. Not because the text was perfect Greek or perfect theology, but because it was perfectly human. It sounded like someone who had actually sat at the feet of the teacher and remembered not the dogma, but the tone of voice. He wrote to Dr. Alamayehu a single sentence. "This is not an echo of Scripture. This is its sibling, raised in a different house." And that sibling has a very different personality. Where the canonical Gospels often speak in public parables, this text speaks in private whispers. Where Paul builds theology like an architect, this Jesus speaks like a lover waking his beloved from sleep. There is no wrath here, no final judgment described, no lake of fire. There is only urgency, the urgency of someone who knows he has hours left and must say the one thing that matters most. You do not need to wait for me to return. I never left. Look inside. Now I want you to meet Mary Magdalene as this text remembers her. Forget the weeping penitent of later paintings. In these pages she is fierce, curious, unafraid. When Peter complains that some teachings are too hard, it is Mary who answers, "Hard for the sleeper, perhaps, not for the one who has opened her eyes." When the disciples argue about who will sit at the right hand in the kingdom, Mary laughs, actually laughs, and says, "Will you still be measuring thrones when the king himself has told us there is no outside and inside?" And Jesus smiles at her the way you smile at the only student who understood the joke. He says, "Among all who have followed me, you alone have seen without veil. Therefore, when they ask who sent you, tell them, I am sent by the one who understands." You can almost hear the 4th century church fathers panicking. A woman sent with authority? A woman who understands better than the men? This is not a threat to doctrine. This is a threat to the entire social order they were trying to baptize. And that, my friend, is exactly why this text had to disappear everywhere else. But it could not disappear in Ethiopia, because in Ethiopia there was no single pope, no single emperor telling the monks what they were allowed to love. Each monastery was its own universe. Each abbot decided for himself which texts fed the soul. And generation after generation, someone at Gunda Gunda decided this one still did. Let me tell you about one of those abbots. His name is lost, but his handwriting survives in the margin of folio 23. In tiny red letters, he wrote a single Ge'ez word, Selam, peace, just that, peace. As if to say, whoever reads this far, breathe. You have found the still point. I want you to picture the chain of hands that carried this manuscript through time, the monk in 420 who copied it, the deacon in 680 who rebound it when the leather cracked. The nun, yes, there were nuns copying sacred texts too, in 1050, who added punctuation marks no one had thought to add before. The warrior monk in 1530 who fought off Muslim invaders with this very codex tucked inside his robe because he believed its words were stronger than any sword. The child in 1880 who practiced his alphabet by tracing over faded letters. And finally, the old abbot in 2023, who decided after prayer that lasted 40 days that the time of hiding was over. Every one of them touched the same parchment you are now imagining. Every one of them heard the same voice speaking across the centuries. The kingdom is within you. Now we come to the passage that scholars argue about most, the one that redefines the cross itself. You and I have grown up with images of Jesus dying to pay a debt we could never repay. But listen to what he says in the hidden gospel. Many will tell you I die so that you need not die. This is not true. I die to show you how to pass through death while still alive. The cross you fear is not punishment. It is the narrow gate every soul must enter to remember its own vastness. He goes on, do not say I take your suffering away. Say rather, I walk ahead of you through the fire so you will know the flames cannot burn what you truly are. And then the line that made Dr. Alamayehu put his head in his hands, every woman and man must drink the cup I drink. But the cup is not wrath, it is awakening. Imagine preaching that in the Roman Empire, where the whole point of religion was to keep the masses obedient through fear of eternal punishment. Imagine preaching that in medieval Europe, where the church sold indulgences to shorten time in purgatory. No wonder this text was buried. It removes the entire leverage of institutional control. If suffering is the doorway to awakening, and awakening is available right now to anyone who remembers, then what exactly do you need a priest for? And yet, this is not Buddhism sneaking into Christianity. This is the same Jesus who wept in Gethsemane, asking for the cup to pass. Only now we understand what the cup really was, not divine anger, but the full weight of human forgetting. He drinks it first so we will recognize the taste and not be afraid. There is a moment near the end of the manuscript where the disciples are weeping, terrified of what is coming. Jesus quiets them and says something so tender it hurts. Why do you cry for me? Cry rather for the years you will spend looking for me in the wrong places. I'm not going to my Father and leaving you orphans. I'm going into you. When you touch your own heart, you touch me. When you comfort the broken, you hold me. When you remember who you are, I am reborn. Then he blesses them, not with hands raised like a king, but with hands open like a brother. And the text ends with a single line in red ink. And Mary understood and was silent, and the silence was full of light. I need you to sit with that silence for a moment. 1700 years ago, a woman understood something so completely that words failed, and the only response left was light. Now, fast forward to December 2024. The Ethiopian Orthodox Synod has met in emergency session 3 times. Conservative bishops want the manuscript locked away again. Younger priests are live streaming translations on TikTok. University students in Addis Ababa are wearing T-shirts that say, "The kingdom is within you," in Amharic. A nun from Waldaba Monastery has started a podcast, reading one saying each morning at sunrise. The government, caught between protecting heritage and fearing unrest, has moved the original codex to a vault beneath the National Museum. but the high-resolution scans are already circulating on academic servers around the world. Scholars are arguing about authenticity the way they argued about the Dead Sea Scrolls 70 years ago. Some say it's a brilliant 4th century forgery. Others say forgery doesn't tremble when you touch it. Carbon dating can tell you when the goat died, but it cannot measure ore. And ordinary people like you and me, are doing something no council can control. They are reading the words for themselves and feeling something shift inside their chest. A Catholic priest in Manila told me he read the passage about Mary Magdalene and wept during Mass, because for the first time he understood why women kept showing up at the tomb first. A Protestant pastor in Texas removed the word substitutionary from his atonement sermon and watched half the congregation walk out and half stay for 3 hours asking questions. An atheist philosophy professor in Paris said the text gave him permission to use the word sacred without irony. This is how revolutions begin, not with tanks, but with a sentence that will not stay buried. I want to take you back one last time to Gunda Gunda. It is dusk now. The monks are chanting the evening psalms in Ge'ez, voices rising and falling like breath itself. Dr. Alamayehu is sitting on the terrace overlooking cliffs that drop into cloud. He has not slept properly in weeks. Journalists keep calling. The synod keeps threatening, but he is smiling. I asked him why. He pointed to the horizon where the sun was bleeding gold across the mountains and said, "Because the words are free now. They have done what words always do when they are true. They have escaped." He told me something else I will never forget. Every year on the eve of Easter, the monks of Gunda Gunda used to take out a special incense burner shaped like a dove. They would fill it with frankincense and myrrh and walk through the church, letting the smoke rise through a hidden tube so that the dove appeared to breathe fire. For centuries they did this without knowing why. The ritual was just the way it has always been. Last year, after the manuscript was opened, one of the oldest monks found a note tucked inside the incense burner written in 15th century handwriting. It said, "When the hidden sayings return, let the dove breathe again, for the spirit is fire within." They lit the dove again this year. For the first time in living memory, the youngest monks understood what they were doing. They were not performing a ritual. They were remembering. And that, my friend, is what this discovery is really about. It is not about proving or disproving the Bible you grew up with. It is about remembering something older than any book, the direct, unmediated knowledge that the same light that animated Jesus animates you. The same love that held Mary Magdalene in that upper room holds you right now as you listen to my voice. The kingdom is not a place. It is a frequency you learn to tune to by getting very quiet and very honest. The mountains of Ethiopia have done their job. They kept the flame alive through plague and invasion, through colonialism and war, through every attempt to turn spirit into structure. Now the flame is in your hands. So here is my question to you, the only one that matters. What will you do with a gospel that tells you salvation is not something you wait for, but something you remember? What will you do with a teacher who says the entire purpose of his life was to remind you that you never left home? What will you do with a woman disciple who looked into the eyes of God and was not afraid? The manuscript ends with Mary in silence, and the silence full of light. I think that silence is still speaking. I think it has been speaking through every person who ever fed the hungry, forgave the unforgivable, chose love when fear was easier. I think it spoke through the monk who copied by lamplight, through the child who traced the letters, through Dr. Alamayehu trembling in a monastery older than nations. And now it is speaking through me to you. Do not ask where the kingdom is. Close your eyes. Put your hand on your chest. Feel that small drum beating out its ancient rhythm. That is the door. Knock, and it will be opened. The mountains have whispered long enough. Now it is your turn to speak.